welcome to our webinar this afternoon. This is Nurture Nature, Impacts of COVID-19 to the Planet and the People. I hope you're all having a great day so far. Thank you for attending our webinar. This is presented by UP CEFAL Philippines. CEFAL stands for International Training Center for Authorities and Leaders. On topics, this will be about the topics related to sustainable development, always making sure to leave no one behind. And this afternoon, we will be joined by 3 panelists. But before that, we would like to thank our partners, Junior Chambers International Philippines, 2030 Youth Force in the Philippines, Iconic Travels and Events, Youth Advocates for the Philippines, Youth for Earth Society, and Pass It On. We have with us here participants not only from the Philippines, but also from Pakistan, the United States, Nepal, Peru, and Turkey. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. So about the program, I'll give you an overview. You know that the outbreak of epidemics like the COVID-19 reveal the fundamental tenets and the trade-off that we consistently face. Humans have unlimited needs, but the planet has limited capacity to satisfy them. And so to be able to balance the needs and the resources, people must learn to transition to sustainable living practices. And so this afternoon, through this webinar, we aim to highlight the relationship between our planet and the people. And this also serves as a platform for discussion and exchange of ideas and experiences on the relationship between a sustainable planet and environment. So in this webinar, we aim to explore different practices of sustainable living, including responsible consumption. So our panelist for today is Mr. Ramon San Pascual of Healthcare Without Harm Southeast Asia, Attorney Mark Gamboa of the Center for Neighborhood Studies Philippines, and Ms. Virginia Vanessa Lauren of Greenpeace Philippines. All right, so this afternoon we'll hear from our 3 speakers, and after that we will have a question and answer portion. And from there, we will have a round-up session where we will hear the messages from our speakers. So to officially start our program, we will begin with an overview of this session. Everyone, let's hear it from the director of the UP Diliman Extension Program in Pampanga and the executive director of UP CEFAL Philippines, Dr. Edna Ko.
In this wire or webinar, Rosenberg, a young Swedish environmentalist who gained prominent view, I quote, "Humanity faces an existential crisis arising from climate change," unquote. Since her shout out to the world leaders at the UN meeting in 2019, we blast our conscience on climate inaction. At this time of the wicked COVID-19, nature seems to be enjoying itself without us, without human. When everyone kept himself at home, as one video, Disney, usually teeming with people, lost its magic. Everyone in New York learned to sleep in that place where no one sleeps. The Great Wall of China loses its image as the forest, as the solid forest. Sadly, we realize that power, fame, money have no worth in the context of what COVID-19 brings us. Amidst this crisis, and as caged at homes, the earth continues its beautiful life. Coronavirus crisis has a message, therefore. We, human kind, are not essential to earth and planet. Without us, the earth, the air, the sky, the waters are fine. The planet lives with us. The message, therefore, is this. On this planet, people are only guests, ardent occupants. Nature is fine. This webinar on Nurture Nature, impacts to planet and people reminds us that people are dependent on a healthy planet. The call of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals number 12, responsible consumption and production. SDG 15, low water. SDG 15, life on land. Impact on SDG 3, which is good health and well-being. People depend on health of the planet for the planet to people. On behalf of the UPC Philippines, an affiliate of the United Nations Training and Research, 200 funds in the now of this country, from the US, Pakistan, Nepal, Peru, Turkey, among others. Likewise, I cannot have speakers for a great expertise. Most partners this call, and 1,000 thanks to them. The Junior Chamber International, the SDG Youth Force, the Iconic Travel, Youth Advocates, Youth for Earth Society, and pass it on. Everyone, thank you for tuning in, for watching. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Ma'am Edna. And now, just a reminder for all our participants, this webinar is recorded and will be uploaded on our CEPHAL Philippines Facebook page. And again, for your questions, for our panelists, you may use the Q&A function in our Zoom platform. You can see that at the bottom of your screens. It will be best to indicate the name of the speaker you wish to answer your questions. And all right, so to start our set of speakers for this afternoon, our first speaker is a population health and environment policy advocate. He has dedicated many years working with policymakers and stakeholders on population health, environment, and sustainable development issues. Our speaker holds a bachelor's degree in political economics and a University of Washington master's degree in public health. Let's welcome our first speaker, Executive Director of Healthcare Without Harm Southeast Asia, Mr. Ramon San Pascual.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Aya, and to my good friend Edna. Good to see you again. I am really happy and grateful for inviting us over the Healthcare Without Harm to be part of your session today. The topic that was given to me is the effects of COVID-19 on the environment, and for which in the next 15 minutes or so, I will cover three topics. One is how climate crisis and COVID-19 converge, adding up to the huge environmental crisis that we're having. Second, the immediate impact of COVID-19, which is on voluminous waste, particularly of single-use plastic, coming off from the PPEs and other related materials being used for treatment of COVID-19. And then third, how the sustainable consumption and production link up with the rest of the SDGs, particularly 40 SDGs that I would cite as an important element in future-proofing the recovery from COVID-19. So let me start, if we move to the first slide. Yeah, there have been many discussions, and this is proven true, and as we prolong this, as we get prolonged in this crisis, we see the strong link between the climate crisis and COVID-19 convergence, at least in three areas. One is on common causes. Second is what are the comorbidity of both, and what is the health inequity that it produces. And therefore, what kind of systemic change do we need to desire and to aim for if we want to resolve not only the COVID-19 pandemic and avoid its repetition, but ensuring that we will have sustainable future by sustaining our environment and addressing climate change. So in the next slide, I want to talk a bit about the link of climate and COVID-19 as seen in the massive deforestation and altering land use that we have seen over the years, which become the common cause for both climate change and this pandemic. Deforestation for logging, agricultural expansion, and mining is known to be the leading driver of climate change. And you would see in many of the climate actions, some of the more simplistic, but also true solution is to plant trees all over again in the vacant space, although it's not as simple as that, but it goes to show that cutting trees and clearing lands for different purposes, whether for residential, industrial, or agricultural expansion, hurt us most again. And particularly in the succeeding bullet, you would see some of the data that the loss of forest accounted for approximately 12% of the greenhouse gas emission. This is only between 2000 and 2005. So you can imagine how much we can contribute in reducing greenhouse gas emission if we're able to also cut down on further harming our forest. And yet, the forest is both useful for positive purposes and useful for destructive purposes, depending on who are the stakeholders. But for common people, we know that we appreciate the forest because it gives us the rainfall that we need, the biodiversity, it helps us in agriculture with the natural pollinators coming up from the forest, and then it absorbs the carbon, the large carbon coming up from industrial and human activities, and as well as clean water. These are just examples of how much useful forests are to our day-to-day living. And yet, it is also poverty and then greed that makes people cut down our forests, whether for upland farming of small farmers or for big-time logging of some industrial and corporate entities that destroys everything that we make use of the forest. Now, land use change and agricultural intensification as the leading drivers of infectious diseases. And this we find out more and more now that we know that the cause of this virus coming up from Wuhan in China is possibly some kind of an animal sold in the public market that transferred to regular people, and then it spread out. Then it will facilitate that pandemics like the COVID-19 and climate are threat multipliers that will make people driven further into poverty, just like what we're seeing now in terms of unemployment, loss of livelihood, and then even basic access to healthcare. It goes to show that poor people are to be victimized further by a pandemic like what we're having now. And then that further drives social injustices. We know that in the Philippine context, the poorest who need to work badly don't even have the basic right to bring them over to their workplaces, and they are subjected to strict quarantine, they are being arrested. And these are the poor people in the most crowded communities where you also find the most dense transmission of the virus. Such an injustice. And air pollution is primarily caused by the combustion of fossil fuels for transportation and energy generation. The same air pollution that makes people very vulnerable because of the respiratory illness that further attract virus such as COVID-19. And particulate matter from air pollution increases the risk of pneumonia, particularly for older people and other vulnerable sectors. Now, if we stick further on relying on for our energy from fossil fuel, then that will just make us more vulnerable in the future to further harmful effects of pandemic, especially those people who already in the first place have respiratory illnesses. In the succeeding slides, I'm now move over to the other comorbidity, which is the warming climate. The heat and droughts lead to forest fires that drive wildlife closer to humans. So we need to study as well what human activities and nature and natural events that drive further the wildlife to get closer to what we call as the humanity, what we call as our own community or our own social villages. And so heat and drought is one. And then extreme weather can also disrupt relationships between predators and prey that keep pathogen-carrying pests like mice and mosquitoes in check. Even without this pandemic, we have this almost a whole year round of different kinds of illnesses brought about by mosquitoes. And this also even kills more people than what we're having now in the Philippines, death coming off from COVID-19. Now, the climate crisis will also lower host animal immune responses to zoonotic diseases, thus increasing the rate of zoonotic infection by crippling biodiversity and push animals into new migration routes that will bring them again closer to our communities, to human contact. Now, that's the first part. Let me move quickly to what is healthcare without harm doing in terms of the biggest environmental issue, at least that is visible and worrisome, which is the waste coming off from PPEs and other materials being used to treat COVID-19. Waste is among the 10 sustainability goals of the Global Green and Healthy Hospital Network, being run and collaborated with by the Healthcare Without Harm globally, and particularly in my office for Southeast Asia. But you would see in the slide several other sustainability goals, which all desire to transform healthcare as an ally of the environment, that healthcare should do no harm both to people and to our environment, and should do no harm to climate. So along waste, leadership, chemicals, energy, water, transportation, and other day-to-day operational necessities that run any regular hospital. But let's talk about medical waste or healthcare waste. If we move to the next slide, we've been doing work on eliminating plastics in hospitals in Southeast Asia for close to 3 years now. We do waste audit to find out what is the hospital's contribution in plastic pollution. And out of it, we already produced a manual or a toolkit to help out doctors, nurses, medical staff, administrators, and even the ministries of health in various Southeast Asian countries to address plastic pollution in hospital settings. In a typical day, you may be shocked, but the hospital plastic waste volume may come to about 60 to 70%. Any bag that you open up, whether it's the green, the yellow, or the black bag, will yield 70% plastic. And you can imagine how much, therefore, plastic waste in our ocean. So this is worrisome now as we confront COVID-19. In the next slide, you would see some of the materials that we have produced. Early on, as early as March or April, we already produced some materials, if only to make the public and hospitals understand how to manage healthcare waste in a facility setting. And I'll talk about it, but here you see an 8-step procedure that goes to show that we should not be overreacting on COVID and on COVID waste particularly. The box number 2 there, it talks about treat coronavirus waste as normal infectious waste, meaning sabon at tubig. Regular hand soap and water will clean up whatever virus you have in your body and in your hand. Beyond that, may already be a overreaction, and that's why we need to put there the slide about no need to burn or incinerate COVID-19 related waste. This is an overreaction that would not help in any way treat COVID-19, but rather make environmental harm and further worsening the crisis. The most important thing in the next slide is the treatment of waste at the source, whether it's in healthcare facilities or in community settings. In healthcare facilities, the sources of waste are potentially those that are infectious, the patients, and probably even the guests, or even at times doctors are carrier of infection of the virus itself. Waste generated by the staff that are caring for patients, and waste from medical laboratories. So knowing where the source of the waste will make you more knowledgeable on how to treat it, how to take care of your own waste. In community setting, it can also be protective equipment. With the regular use of the mask, we need to be worried where do we dispose the mask, because now we are gradually finding out that it ends up in our rivers, in the ocean, and it is made up, a big part of the mask is made up of plastic that can never become it's not biodegradable. And therefore, and moving to the next slide, we need to segregate waste at source. Again, we put emphasis, do not overreact. No need to even introduce any burn technology or any new technology in treating COVID-related waste. Again, alcohol may not even be necessary if you have soap and water, if you have access to soap and water in your own home. Just do that, and you don't even need to put alcohol on your hands. Dispose in an infectious waste bin with a suitably color-coded liner, particularly in healthcare setting. And follow the routine cleaning. And what we're telling hospitals is that if you have your system set up on treating waste, on managing waste, just follow that. Do not do anything differently, but follow diligently the established waste management system that you have had before the COVID-19 crisis. And then, for further guidance, follow the WHO or even our own Department of Health, and Healthcare Without Harm has produced several materials as well on how to, whether to use gloves properly, to those infectious what you call as infectious anti-infection tunnel that lately has killed a calf. That should not happen, because this gas should not be directed to human faces to get rid of for disinfection purposes. It kills, and it did show how those manning swab centers are also poisoned by this supposedly disinfection tunnel. And then there are many other guidance that we can make use of. In the succeeding slides, What we are more concerned about in healthcare without harm, especially at the onset of this COVID-19, are the healthcare workers that have been dying or getting illnesses while doing their work. They are our new heroes for the fact that they're protecting our lives, and yet they are sacrificing their very own. And we have these bullets as well on how we are able to at least show our concern and be practical in terms of helping out frontline workers. Now, the treatment options, again, I won't keep on emphasizing that I won't stop emphasizing that the virus is susceptible to soap. In the next slide, please. To soap and most normal disinfectants. Steam-based treatment such as autoclaving or microwaving is the preferred manner for treatment of waste. Again, never incineration. After disinfection and mutilation, waste can be sent for disposal or recycling. In other places, masks are being recycled, and this is not advisable. So we are even suggesting that you need to cut the used mask if only people will not resort to recycling them. Now, we are against the tenor of the ADB in the next slide, advisory on managing infectious waste during the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly in the context of the Southeast Asian countries. Because at the end of this advisory, they are suggesting that maybe some new technology and possibly even incineration need to be introduced to Philippines, Indonesia, and those countries that are having high infection rate. And this we said no, and this is why in the succeeding weeks we will even conduct research to prove that this would not work and will even be more harmful. Now, the guidance of GGH8 is more than enough on waste. As you would see in the succeeding slide, we have guidance document on building sustainable hospitals, on reusing and managing water, using healthcare setting, waste, energy. And this is where the mission of Healthcare Without Harm, caring for patients and the environment come in. That is the transformative nature of our organization, to fuse in the healing of human illness as well as our environmental ills. In the succeeding slide, if you move next, these are the prescriptions that we left to hospitals after the audit has been made on how to manage plastics in healthcare settings. So we need to eliminate single-use plastics, which are very practical in the cafeteria of hospitals. It can be done. Get rid of disposable knives, forks, spoons, straws. This is a problem nowadays because suddenly, even in the bills being proposed in our Congress, they are saying that due to COVID-19, restaurants must resort to disposable. We are making ways to educate our policymakers on this. That again, anything that you wash with soap and water thoroughly, get rid of the virus, and therefore you don't need to add more single-use plastic waste to our ocean or to our dump site. If you keep on even put into law for restaurants to use disposables. And then the other recommendations meant for hospitals to minimize their plastic waste and even procure sustainable materials instead of single-use plastics. Now, PPE is a distinct problem. Maybe I can talk about that when we come to our open forum. In the last set of slides, I just want to cite in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals, and these are concluding slides. I want to highlight 4 SDGs that will help us address environmental crises emanating from COVID-19 and environmental crises that even make climate change threatening to humanity. These four are one, the climate goal or climate action, which is goal 13. We need to, in the context of putting up recovery plans and sustainable recovery program, the climate action would need additional commitment to decarbonization. One, and then on the next environmental goal among the 17 SDGs, I put emphasis on life on land, which is goal 15, such that diseases passed from animals to humans, such as the one that is now the COVID-19, we can be addressed, and we are able to avoid another pandemic. Can we move to the next slide, please? Okay, now I'm talking about, I'm done with the climate action as an essential goal that we need to attend to in future-proofing sustainable recovery, and then as well as the land goal, which is the goal 15 of the SDGs. And then for the last slide, the two other SDGs that I would think are critical is the life below water, which is our ocean, our marine environment. And this is where we think that we should minimize plastic waste, because it all ends up, as we all know, in our oceans. And then the last, and I think this is critical for in the context of the current webinar, is to encourage and move towards responsible consumption and production, rather than a carbon dominant kind of economy. We must move to a green economy. One, avoid the depletion of natural resources, and avoid the carbon-intensive industries, as well as environmental, that will yield environmental health issues and diseases. Now, responsible consumption, we are now proving more and more that it is workable. For example, we are doing our online work mostly at home, and it works. It is productive. We are creating more networks. We can dig up further into the concerns of our societies through this online interaction. We should sustain that. And these are effective ways of leading our economy and our society to less carbon footprint, and therefore more responsible consumption and production. I will end up there, and I say thank you to all the organizers. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for that. All right, so for our next speaker, he is a lawyer and a registered and licensed environmental planner, and he serves as a consultant for various international, national, and local government entities. He has extensive research and professional experience in urban and regional planning legislation, spatial and comprehensive development planning, and smart cities and neighborhoods, to name a few. We have with us Assistant Professor at the UP School of Urban and Regional Planning and Board of Trustees member of the Center for Neighborhood Studies, Attorney Mark Messina Gamboa.
Wait for a while. I have to.
All right, while we're preparing the presentation of Sir Mark, may I remind everyone that you can ask your questions through our Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and our panelists will answer your questions at the end after all our speakers have presented. All right, Sir Mark is ready.
Okay, good afternoon. First of all, I would like to thank CIFAL Philippines for inviting the Center for Neighborhood Studies and for allowing us to share what we know and what we want to happen in terms of resetting life for sustainability. So I will focus my presentation or my talk on collaborative creation of smarter and sustainable neighborhoods. Let me first share my observation about how cities reacted to COVID-19. The way we see cities has drastically changed. Cities were forced to slow down. Many were actually even forced to shut down. Urban life has transformed into something that urban dwellers had thought would not even be possible. Proposals after proposals have been brought forward so as to make Metro Manila adapt to the changing urban environment amid the threat of COVID-19. There are pockets of potential best practices and innovations implemented by various institutions at various temporal and spatial scales. Both the national government and the local government have come up with initiatives taking into consideration that cities can never go back to the old normal, but ought to move forward to the new normal. For instance, two national government agencies both came up with their respective plans of transforming EDSA, our circumferential highway that serves as the major thoroughfare of Metro Manila. Non-government organizations, on the other hand, have urged the government to promote the use of bicycles as a non-motorized alternative to the perennially traffic-clogged highway. But the government has been sending mixed signals to the general public. Another initiative that is put forward, which was in fact institutionalized and formalized pursuant to an executive order issued by the President of the Republic of the Philippines, is the Balik Probinsya Bagong Pag-asa program, which the executive order also calls BP squared. Among the reasons stated for the BP squared is to reverse migration to the National Capital Region. Specifically, the program is geared towards addressing Metro Manila's congested urban areas by encouraging people, especially the informal settlers. I would like to emphasize and highlight that this is especially for the informal settlers to return to their home provinces. But this program seems met with challenges as well. We have seen varying proposals as solutions, but the more important question that has to be addressed is what was the problem in the first place? Beyond being fixated towards finding solutions to predetermined problems, we should be emphasizing the dynamics that give rise to the desirable or undesirable condition. We have been faulting density as the reason for our ills in metropolitan Manila. But was density per se the problem? Or was it just the inefficiency of density? We have been faulting Filipinos for our alleged lack of discipline. But was lack of discipline really the problem? Or was it the failure of our institutions to effectively put in place structures and systems in the first place? We have been faulting our provincianos. I am a proud provinciano myself, who flocked to the metropolis to work and settle. But was their migration to the city per se the problem? Or was it the failure on the part of our duty bearers to empower and ensure that our rights holders enjoy their right to the city? To understand the problems that we face amid COVID-19 and for us to reset our lives for sustainability, it is critical to fully understand the dynamics that will result in a more sustainable lifestyle. I chose to use cities as my subject, as one of my avenues to reset life for sustainability. Cities are continuously growing and expanding. It is expected that by 2030, more than half of the population will be residing in urban areas. The social and cultural dimensions of cities have been well recognized as a key factor in achieving sustainability outcomes. The creation and expansion of cities in the near future will require considerable amount of new urban infrastructure, resulting in significant demand for natural resources and further exacerbating existing environmental pressures. Cities consume the largest amount of global resources and generate enormous waste outputs. I would like to focus my talk on cities by arguing that we have to understand urban issues and challenges from the inside out, meaning focusing on the more granular scale of planning and governance, which are the neighborhoods. The resilience of Philippine urban spaces and neighborhoods has been tested by natural disasters. In fact, the Philippines has one of the more established policy frameworks for promoting climate and disaster risk resilience. But COVID-19 has put more difficult challenges to urban neighborhoods. We have seen how existing social and spatial inequalities in cities have been aggravated by the pandemic. The imposition of quarantine also given us new, albeit baffling, understanding of urban public space, mobility, density, appropriate infrastructure, adequate housing, and even clean environment. These are consistent and regular challenges that we as urban planners and policymakers have been hurdling since time immemorial, but have been exacerbated by our current experience in COVID-19. But I would like to think that the pandemic offers us a great opportunity to rethink our cities and do things differently. We have to seize this opportunity by adapting our planning models and approaches to transform our cities and neighborhoods, not just for the present generation, but the future generations as well. The recent publication of UN Habitat and World Health Organization argues that health and well-being must be integrated in spatial and structural planning by aptly asking the question, if the purpose of planning is not for human and planetary health, then what is it for? Planning cities and neighborhoods is one of the many ways through which we can reset our lives for sustainability. The links between sustainable resource management and spatial planning have always been recognized. The fact is likewise widely acknowledged that the spatial organization of cities and their infrastructures influence resource management practices. How do we then transition to urban sustainability and justice? I would like to share the Campbell's triangle diagram to put into context how complex it is to transition to urban sustainability and justice. The Campbell's diagram has three corners, and those three corners of the triangle represent key goals in planning: social justice, overall economic growth and efficiency, and environmental protection. That triangle also has three axes, which represent the three resulting conflicts: the development conflict, the resource conflict, and the property conflict. While at the center of the triangle represents sustainable development. That's where we balance these three goals. The role of the planners is to engage the current challenge of sustainable development by managing and resolving conflict and by promoting creative, technical, and innovative solutions. We need better tools to understand our cities, not just as an economic system or a static inventory of natural resources, but also as an environmental system that is a part of regional and global networks of trading goods, information, resources, and even pollution. The problems that urban planning tries to address are not simple problems. Both in policy making and urban planning, policymakers and planners alike are dealing with wicked problems. Wicked problems are difficult to define, unpredictable, and defy rational decision making. So the challenge of transitioning cities towards not just urban sustainability, but to urban justice could be characterized as one of those wicked problems. It is important to consider that urban futures are chaotic and that there is no one panacea that exists. When we try to plan for sustainability, it is also important to consider that human behavior varies in space, but we have tools to deal with these uncertainties. For cities to transition to the new normal, or better still, the smart normal, it is important to have a paradigm shift that provides an alternative framework to rethink urbanization. And this framework should help us reimagine cities through the smart and sustainable neighborhood lens. One of the goals that we have, or one of the tools that we have to deal with the uncertainty of urban futures is adaptive planning. It veers away from overzealous emphasis on problem identification and solution to predetermined problems. Rather, adaptive planning emphasizes the understanding of the dynamics that give rise to desirable or undesirable phenomena. This means that planning has to move from being a prescriptive activity to a process of learning which entails collaborative process, engaging not just the bureaucrats and the technocrats, but the communities and the neighborhoods as well. It is also important that the planning process follows a hybrid of bottom-up and top-to-bottom processes. This issue can be embodied in the question, if you want to know how the shoe fits, ask the person who is wearing it, not the one who made it. For adaptive planning to promote sustainable urban futures, emphasis has to be given to neighborhood unit in the context of the advent of the fourth industrial revolution, coupled with Society 5.0 and the importance of big data and analytics in the attainment of the SDGs. In the Philippines, neighborhoods are loosely translated to mean as barangays. The SHLC Philippine team and the SENSE team argued that in some areas, barangay could very well represent the concept of neighborhood. But in other areas, characterizing barangays as neighborhoods is challenging. There are cases where a number of neighborhoods exist within a barangay. Take, for instance, a regional city like Batangas City. While in other cases, there are neighborhoods that transcend the physical and political boundaries of barangays. In this, an example would be our capital city, which is the city of Manila, which has 890 plus barangays. So as not to confuse the concepts of neighborhoods and barangays, the Center for Neighborhood Studies adopts the concepts of neighborhood using the Filipino term kapitbahayan. The diagram on the screen is a sample map of neighborhoods. The black circle represent walkable neighborhoods around 800 meters in diameter. Red circles represent districts formed by groups of neighborhoods. Several districts comprise a city. So these red and black circles indicate that neighborhoods can be defined at multiple scales. It is therefore important that the selection of a specific neighborhood definition should capture the meaning most relevant to the problem or the challenge that we are addressing. For example, improving accessibility, urban design, reducing car dependence, providing health benefits, and so on and so forth. The current National Urban Development and Housing Framework proposes that urban planning and design return to human-scaled proportions and design neighborhoods in terms of human scale and walkability. Corollary to the approach of adaptive planning that requires a shift in spatial planning is the challenge to the attainment of the SDGs amidst Industrial Revolution 4.0 or 4IR. The 4IR is driven by technologies such as artificial intelligence, big data, robotics, the Internet of Things, and virtual and augmented reality, among others. 4IR could and should be used as a leverage to achieve SDGs. The concept of Society 5.0 complements the attainment of sustainable development. Society 5.0 originated in Japan. It is based on the idea that human society is moving into a fifth stage, from hunting society, agrarian society, industrial society, information society, to the fifth stage, which is the super smart society or Society 5.0. The Society 5.0 is to create a human-centric society in which both economic development and the resolution of societal challenges are achieved, and people enjoy, of course, a high quality of life. Another important concept that has to be integrated in neighborhood planning is the concept of big data. Big data has become a buzzword. It is used to describe a massive volume of both structured and unstructured data that is so large that it is difficult to process using traditional database and software techniques. Recently, its value and utility for development work has been recognized. The availability of big data provides a unique opportunity to support the achievements of the Sustainable Development Goals. Big data could potentially provide a clear data-driven and evidence-based policy-making and decision-making towards the attainment of the SDGs. The transitioning to the smart normal requires us to take advantage of the fourth industrial revolution, particularly big data. Cities have to be reimagined as well. The manner in which we conceptualize a city has direct implications on what policy or planning recommendations can be produced. Cities have to be reconceptualized using the ecosystem perspective. An ecosystem perspective widens the understanding of cities to include relationships between actors and between other system elements, thus offering a stronger prospect for achieving urban sustainability. The application of urban metabolism can also assist decision makers in pursuing more resource-efficient urban planning and effective waste minimization strategies. A circular metabolism is one with closed loops, wherein all outputs are potential inputs. Cities have typically been designed following linear metabolisms: resource, consumption, waste. The long-term viability and sustainability of cities is reliant on shifting from linear to circular metabolisms. Industry 4.0 gives us digitization, real-time monitoring and data collection, and big data analytics. These are elements that we could harness to facilitate the attainment of SDGs. For instance, the implementation of transparent sustainability reporting could lead to increased reliable data, contributing to the decrease in material flows and waste flows. Ultimately, this contributes to the attainment of SDG 12, which is responsible consumption and production. We have had several initiatives that could potentially contribute to urban sustainability and justice. I will use here the case of the City of Manila, not just because it is one of our partner cities for the Sustainable, Healthy, and Learning Cities and Neighborhoods project, but also because, as the mayor of the city puts it, the City of Manila is the window of the Philippines to the world. The mayor has made policy pronouncements to bring back green spaces in the city, not just open spaces, but green spaces. In fact, the city government, through the City Council, enacted Ordinance Number 8607 this year that declared Arroceros Forest Park as a permanent forest park in the city. The pandemic has also indicated that there will be challenges to our food supply chain. Hence, promotion of urban agriculture is heightened. We have seen time and again that space is not a problem for urban agriculture. Vertical urban agriculture is now possible through the use of technology. Another concept that is being promoted, which also has been promoted previously, but has been highlighted because of the COVID-19 pandemic, is the concept of walkability. Simply stated, walkability is the extent to which the built environment is friendly to people moving on foot in an area. The National Urban Development and Housing Framework proposes a benchmark for walkability at 400-meter radius or a 5-minute walk. For other countries, walkability means 15-minute walk. For the Philippines, it's just 5-minute walk. If we are to promote responsible production and consumption by collaborative creation of smarter and sustainable neighborhoods, we cannot simply go back to our old normal urban planning. Urban planning process should not only move from multidisciplinary to transdisciplinary to antidisciplinary action, but should also engage directly with stakeholders. A single discipline is not sufficient. Antidisciplinary spaces simply do not fit into any existing academic discipline. The antidisciplinary space facilitates planning of complex adaptive systems. In tackling the multidimensional character of urban sustainability challenges, which requires us to balance environmental protection measures, social cohesion, and the provision of justice, it is important to adopt participatory and transparent processes. Urban sustainability planning necessarily requires shifting from a perspective activity to a process of learning. Another approach that we've been proposing is the use of meta design at the neighborhood level. Meta design is a conceptual framework in which new forms of collaborative design can take place. The knowledge to understand, frame, and solve problems is not given, but is constructed and evolved during the problem-solving process with the neighborhood. Meta design deals with co-creation by dealing and activating collaborative processes which allow the emergence of creative activities in open and evolvable environments. Another approach is the place-based approach to planning, or PBA. PBA is a systematic yet people-centric approach to understanding places by observing human behavior, patterns of urban life, or what we call lived experiences, which we were trying to capture in our SHLC project, and the socio-ecological relationships, which informs the creation, innovation, and maintenance of spaces through the integration of experts' knowledge and neighborhood knowledge of the place. PBA also recognizes the importance of local knowledge, cultural characteristics, community capacity, and social capital. This involves observing, listening, and asking those who live, work, and use the particular space to determine their needs and aspiration of the place and improve its livability. This is a critique to the so many interventions that the government has put in place as a response to COVID-19. It seems that the government appears to not know what really the problem is. We are also proposing to plan across scales. I've been advocating for neighborhood planning, but it doesn't mean that we should focus on neighborhood planning. At the center, we recognize that urban and rural areas have linkages. So planning across scales would be able to put that forward. And also, we should harness technology, artificial intelligence and algorithms. Perhaps algorithmic-based models of urban planning can be explored now. Before I close, I would like to share an initiative by the Center for Neighborhood Studies, which aims to operationalize these principles on reconceptualizing urban planning. This initiative is called by our technical researcher, Mr. Ryan Rivera, as Immersive Pocket Planning of Neighborhoods. IPP of Neighborhoods is an applied research and knowledge exchange initiative aimed at making the planning function more accessible, intuitive, engaging, and empowering. Primarily, the initiative entails the development and use of a technology, a specific technology, virtual reality. So we're planning to come up with an application, a virtual reality application that serves as a planning coach and a visualization tool. By doing so, we make planning not just a technical process, but as a co-learning process. It also introduces the concept which Ryan calls distance civics, where public participation is done remotely through cloud-based solutions and virtual reality. So the distance civics mode is an adaptive planning measure that we think is appropriate in the light of the new normal or the smart normal, and is a prerequisite to physical distancing. So that ends my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Mark, for that presentation. All right, thank you for making sense of urban sustainability and designing the smarter normal. So on to our third speaker. She is a campaigner of Greenpeace Philippines, a global network of organizations present in 55 countries. And her campaign revolved around the interconnected issues of food, nutrition, health, climate change, and agriculture. Joining us today is Miss Virginia Vanessa Lauren. Ma'am?
Thank you, Iya. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope we are well amid all these challenges that we're facing right now. So without much ado, I will begin my presentation with what has already been mentioned, and I think what you already know. The people here, I assume, already know this, but just to refresh our mind, I'd like to say that a clean environment is essential for a healthy living. That's my first slide next to this one. Right, thank you. So it cannot be overemphasized. It has always been said, take care of our environment so that the environment could take care of us. The more we don't care of the environment, the more it will become polluted with contaminants and toxins that has a harmful impact on our health, on our livelihood, and on our lives as a whole. As mentioned by the earlier presenters, diseases, as it turns out, is largely an environmental issue. About 75% of all emerging infectious diseases, they come from animals. An increasing number of animal carriers are changing their behavior and migrating to new areas due to climate change and habitat loss. And to emphasize, human intervention in the environment not only causes the decrease in biodiversity, but it also forces many wild animals to find new habitats, driving them closer to populated areas and into closer contact with us. So this creates an opportunities for pathogens and organisms that causes diseases to move from animals to humans, and significantly increases the likelihood of epidemic outbreaks. Okay, so that is the environment, just explaining a bit about how important it is, just reiterating what we already know. Next slide, please. So our consumption greatly affects the environment. Our use, buy, throw away, buy more, fast food, fast fashion, single-use plastic, and disposable items are trashing our planet and putting too much pressure to our environment. Unsustainable consumption is driving a vicious cycle of environmental destruction and injustice. Let's talk about food and the environment. So the way we eat affects not only our health, but our environment, not to mention the livelihood of small farmers. In the Philippines, consumers turn to convenient food channels, no? The convenient ones like convenience stores to buy or eat out ready-to-consume food and drinks. Bread and sandwiches, hot dog, for example, bottled water, carbonated soft drinks are popular items. Also increasing in popularity among customers of convenience stores are fried chicken, energy drinks, chocolate powder mixes, 3-in-1 coffee mixes, and ready-to-drink beverages. Let us also take a look about our food wastage. Based on the Food and Nutrition Research Institute 2015 survey, a Filipino household wastes 43 grams of rice daily. And around 33% of the Philippines' total food production goes to waste. That is according to 2015 report from the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation. We often overlook food waste as contributor to climate change. But we have to understand that before food reaches our plate, there are already a lot of greenhouse gas emissions involved in food production. The storage units that food companies use emits carbon dioxide, methane, among others. Packaging itself is already another factor. It has a detrimental effect on the environment. So think of the number of plastics, boxes, metal cans produced in a day, and the carbon emissions involved in the shipping, storage, etc., as earlier mentioned by the first speaker. Studies show that food waste and landfills essentially becomes toxic. They release methane, greenhouse gas, that is 20 times harmful to the environment, to the atmosphere, than carbon dioxide. And we know that when it rains, landfills also become a source for groundwater pollution. Their groundwater allows toxic chemicals to develop, and this could be a major problem when they reach major bodies of water. Another one is our meat consumption. We all know that Filipinos are meat eaters. According to Social Weather Station survey, the largest proportion of Filipinos eat meat a few times a week. And the country is one of the fastest growing meat consumers in the world. While our demand for meat is increasing, the consumption of fruits and vegetables is continuously declining. So next slide. So what is wrong with industrial meat consumption? Okay, we all know that because of the profit-driven nature of businesses, of corporations, the vast amounts of meat that has that's being produced now in the market, that's being sold in the market, are pumped out with antibiotics. Sometimes they are, more often than not, this industrial meat, chicken, for example, poultry, for example, are in sanitary conditions. So we're making them grow fast by pumping antibiotics in them. By doing so, there is no consideration for the impacts in the environment. And then advertising, marketing really push meat in our lives because it makes meat, industrial meat, cheaper, available everywhere, convenient. You just go to supermarket and then you can buy something that is readily available. You can just cook it easily. But because of this, because of the availability of the convenience and it's available everywhere, it limits our plant-based consumption choices. So what is the impact on the environment? Livestock, industrial meat production entails a massive usage of our natural resources like water, land, fuel. For example, land are converted so that it can be used for cattle raising, among others. And the deforestation that has been mentioned by Mr. San Pascual earlier, it helps to create the loss of biodiversity and habitats, the loss of watersheds, and the release of greenhouse gas emissions. You know, when trees are cut, they release to the atmosphere the carbon that they store. So in terms of pollution, they create pollution. They create like when they grow crops to feed these animals. They use chemicals, harmful chemicals, synthetic fertilizers that are not good for the environment. It creates air pollution, water pollution, and soil pollution. So that's how our meat consumption is affecting the environment. Okay, next slide. Okay, another one that I'd like to emphasize, apart from the way we eat, is the single-use plastic. We have a throwaway culture. Like we use, when we go to the convenience stores, more often than not, the packaging or the things that they used to wrap are in single plastic. So single plastics are those materials that are designed to be used just once and then thrown away, or plastic materials that fulfill a very short-term purpose. So those plastic bags, water bottles, and other plastic packagings are the most common ones that we see in the convenience stores. And every day when we consume, we use them. Next slide. Just to take a look at the Philippine waste generation, this is what our wastes so far. 52% can be composted, 28% recyclables, 18% residuals, and 2% are special waste. Next. Again, just to emphasize, in the Philippines, this is our waste generation. According to the study of based on 21 waste assessments in 6 cities and 7 municipalities across the Philippines done by Gaia, 59 billion sachets the Philippines is generating, and that's enough to flood Metro Manila 1 foot deep in sachets. That is just an example. Because my presentation should talk about our household consumption, I'd like to share with you some things that we can do to help shape the better normal. So because we do not want to be back on the normal, because the normal is exactly what brought us here. So we wanted a better normal. So let us change the way we consume. Let's diet for climate. Let's eat more fruits and vegetables and less industrial meat. because it helps decrease climate and environmental impacts of the food system. Collectively, if we do this, it drastically reduces demand for industrial livestock that will weaken corporations' hold on our daily lives. We should practice zero-kilometer food consumption. I mean by that, let's buy food that are grown, produced, sold, and consumed in the same place, because it decreases carbon emissions due to transport, packaging. It's fresh, it's seasonal, and ecological. It supports local economy, and it ensures food security. And lastly, on a household level, this is what we can do. Let's think about 7 Rs. We think when we buy something, do we really need it? Think about that. Refuse, say no to packaging, even if it's paper or plastic. If we can do away with it, let's do away with it. Let's reduce. How many do I need? How many shoes do I need? How many bags do I need? Reuse. Maybe you don't have to buy something else, but you just have to reuse, I mean. Rematerialize, get reusable items. When you buy things, make sure it's reusable. Repair, maybe that cell phone still works, maybe you can have it fixed. And then recycle. Remember that Earth is our home. It is where we live, the only planet that we have, so let's better take care of it. But we all know that for sure. So we have to work to make sure that our human economies function within the nature's limit. So let's define ourselves not by what we own, but through our experiences and relationship. But also, going to my last slide, please. While we do simple things in our household, in our own practice, we change the way we consume, there is also another thing that we can do to help shape the better normal. When I say a better normal, it means that one where no Filipino will be vulnerable to pandemics, to disasters, and climate impacts. We can imagine it, so it's possible, and each one of us can contribute to its transition in our unique way, starting with our individual choices, in our lifestyle, in our mindful consumption. So it's unfortunate that it took the current health crisis to unmask the cracks that keep our society uneven and unequal, with the most vulnerable bearing the brunt of the impacts. Yet, we've also seen how concerted efforts from frontliners, from every one of us, from ordinary citizens can benefit everyone. So more than our personal consumption, we need the government and our collective action that's inspired by community-based solutions we see now. So I call on everyone to participate in the process, in the lawmaking, in the creation or development of programs, even in your barangays, in your localities. We have to participate, and we have to call on our governments, our local governments, our national governments. We have to be involved. We have to take action. Let's create a better normal for all of us, starting with ourselves, by participating in the process, by calling our governments, by being involved, and by taking action. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Virgie, for that presentation. And now we will move on to our question and answer portion. We have a couple of questions here. May I invite our speakers again for this question and answers session. I'll start with, all right, Ms. Virgie, we have a question for you from Hannah. Her question is, are producer responsibility laws effective in reducing plastic use? If yes, in your opinion, what makes a good producer responsibility law? What should be included in it, such as sanctions, restrictions, or incentives?
In terms of producing, no, that's the very first step. We believe that they should stop producing single-use plastic already. So we are advocating for them to use alternative delivery systems, because we can only stop single-use plastic at the very source of production. You mentioned choices, but sorry, I didn't get it. There's an you itemize, you mentioned a lot, but yeah, for us, we believe that we can only stop single-use production if we start it from where it starts, no, from the production level.
All right. Thank you for that. And we have a question for, maybe this is for Sir Ramon. How do we find the balance between using as much PPEs to protect the health workers and added pollution brought about by the non-biodegradable and oftentimes environmentally hazardous healthcare waste?
Yeah, can you repeat, because I missed the first part of your question? Can you repeat your question, please?
Sure. Yes po. How do we find the balance between using as much PPEs to protect the health workers and the added pollution brought about by the non-biodegradable and oftentimes environmentally hazardous healthcare waste? And I think you outlined some tips a while ago also. Yes, sir?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And let me state three things that are similar to this question coming up from hospitals that we are helping out. Because admittedly, there is a flooding of waste that is generated by overuse of PPEs. I mean overuse because there seems to be a notion that if you wrap up your body with a PPE, whether in a healthcare setting or in a traffic post to be worn by police, then that protects you enough from the virus. But the contention of hospitals are here. They're practicing sustainability. One, that there are PPEs that are reusable and washable. And therefore, hospitals should not always resort to disposable plastic or single-use plastic PPEs. Secondly, for those that are to be recycled, because the question also as well is what kind of hazardous materials PPE are made of? Because plastic in its very nature are already hazardous by the fact that it is non-biodegradable. But there are also plastic that are essential and plastic that are probably at some point can be recycled for other purposes. That's the other question. Then the third question there is, what is the proper way of disposing PPE? So to answer the question, our hospitals, those that are also into sustainability in healthcare, are differentiating disposable PPE from reusable and washable PPE. And there are many, even before the COVID-19, PPEs can be washed and reused. It's only now because of the virus, of the COVID-19 virus, that PPEs are thought to be disposable right away. And we said no to that. And then secondly, how do you properly dispose that? And there are ways that treating it from the point of where you generated the waste, and then properly making use of whether proper washing or proper disinfection can minimize the nature of the waste that can be generated afterwards. These are being subjected to many studies now, and I just had a meeting this morning about it. So we are addressing that to make use of PPEs in a sustainable manner and not overuse it because there is too much fear of the nature of the virus. again, the
Right.
virus can be dispensed of through using soap and water.
Sir Ramon, we have another question that maybe you can address. Sydney Joseph Torrenueva says, he asked, even if we segregate our waste at home, by the time the garbage collectors collect our waste, they put them all in together in the truck and disposes it without segregating. I think
Yeah, that is, yeah.
How do you think we can address this?
This is the responsibility of the local government units. I am from Marikina, and here it's been institutionalized that there are separate days to haul what we call as nabubulok or biodegradable waste, and then the hindi nabubulok or the regular waste. 2 days, Tuesday and Friday for biodegradable, and non-biodegradable is Saturday. If you violate that, one, it will not be collected from your home. Second, you will be fined. And it's been working perfectly. Therefore, homes, families are taught to segregate at the source. We have separate bags for the kind of trash that we generate from our home. It also, and plastic is banned in Marikina. And therefore, we are forced to use and reuse materials that we can bring to market to put up our bags that can, these are the reusables. So it is now a matter of policy from the local government unit because we have a national law. Secondly, it's now a matter of changing behavior that fuses into the behavior of the household that make these things work, the segregation.
Thank you, sir. All right, and we have another question for Sir Mark. Sir Mark, isn't it time to have a National Land Use Act to have inclusive and integrated development of cities, municipalities, and regions? That's from Jason Villesa.
We have been advocating for a National Land Use Act since the 1980s. And I think some sectors, especially in the real estate development, have been demonizing this National Land Use Act. This National Land Use Act is very important for us to be able to see the appropriate scale of land use planning in the Philippines. You don't do the same planning for cities, the same planning for regions, and the same planning for neighborhoods. So that National Land Use Act will be able to help us identify at what scale of planning will we be able to integrate and make the development of our cities more inclusive. So, but until now, since the 1980s until now, we don't have yet the National Land Use Act. Perhaps because those who are supposed to sponsor the bill are actually the ones who are interested in not passing or enacting the National Land Use Act.
All right, and another question from Alexander Abeliar. Maybe Sir Mark, you can also answer. What should the government prioritize in terms of environmental policies after the COVID-19 crisis?
We have more than 100 environmental laws in the Philippines. Our problem is, actually we have one of the best set of laws in the world. Our problem is the lack of implementation. And that lack of implementation cannot be faulted to the alleged lack of discipline of Filipinos. Filipinos fail to comply. Filipinos find it difficult to comply because the institutions that are supposed to provide an enabling environment for them to be able to comply with these environmental policies are actually fail to provide enabling environment. So the problem is actually implementation, and we have to understand what's the reason why these laws are not being implemented. And when we implement policies, I go back to one of the principles that I live by. We implement, there are policies in the Philippines that marginalize further the poor. So we have to understand environmental laws and understand how this affects the marginalized sector. Not everyone is affected the same. Different sectors are differently affected by environmental laws. So I think that's another point that we have to consider when we come up and implement environmental policies.
Mhm. All right. So we're talking about the impact of or human activity and the COVID-19 pandemic on the environment. But now there's this question: did COVID-19 brought more good or harm to the environment? Maybe at least one of our panelists may weigh in on this. Miss Virgie, would you want to start?
Well, definitely this the COVID did not give us any good, no. But to the environment, there was a short time that the environment, like the air, has it was clear, it was clean for a very short time. But however, the problem that you have that is very temporary, and we do not have another pandemic to show us this. So that is not good. Any pandemic, any disease is not good, even if will give a good, a very, very short temporary effect to the environment. So that is not good, my answer is. And the things that we saw, like a very short environmental good that it gave us, is very, very temporary, and we should not see that. But we have to take this opportunity to change the system, to work together, so that we will have a better normal, and that we will not go back to what has been our normal.
Thank you, Ms. Virgie. And with that, we will wrap up our question and answer. Our panelists may be able to answer some of your questions in the Q&A box. That's a good point also from Ms. Virgie. It's a good way to sum up this afternoon that, it takes a multi-sector approach for everyone to really work together. Aside from our individual practices and behavior change, local government units and different actors in society also have to play a part. And we've seen in this session this afternoon, thank you to our panelists, Sir Mark, Sir Ramon, and Ma'am Virgie for painting a picture on how COVID-19 has had an impact on our environment and what we can do to help protect our environment and hopefully prevent more outbreaks like this pandemic. And with that, we would like to thank our partners this afternoon: Junior Chambers International Philippines, 2030 Youth Force in the Philippines, Youth Advocates for the Philippines, Iconic Travels and Events, Youth for Earth Society, and Pass It On. Thank you for supporting this event. And also, please don't forget to tune in to our next webinar. Register and join in this session so you can also ask and interact with our panelists. On June 16, we will have another session, the youth's well-being, the young in the face of COVID-19, impacts on children and youth's well-being and safety. And again, thank you to our partners who will also be supporting next session. And again, thank you to our panelists, Attorney Mark, Sir Ramon, and Ms. Virgie for joining us this afternoon. Again, this is Nurture Nature, Impacts of COVID-19 to the Planet and the People, hosted by UP Cephal, Philippines. Thank you everyone for joining us today. And please do follow Cephal Philippines on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All right. All right, thank you again.
Thank you.
Everyone
Thank you.
for
Thank you. Thank
participating.
you.
You can see the links to our social media accounts, Cephal Philippines Facebook account, on our chat box.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day and please stay safe.